Rational Wellness Podcasters. Dr. Ben Weitz here. I'm so glad you could join me today for another episode of the Rational Wellness Podcast. Each week, I'll be bringing you the latest cutting-edge information on health and nutrition. In this media-driven world, it's easy to be confused about what's true and what's not. I'll cut through the conflicting headlines to bring you clarity, to help you optimize your health and maximize your life. Please subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. None of the information in this podcast is intended to diagnose any condition, and this podcast is not intended to substitute for going to see your medical doctor and getting sound medical advice. So let's get started on your path to better health. Hey podcasters, Dr. Ben Weitz here with another episode of the Rational Wellness Podcast. I'm so glad you could join us today. We have a very special guest today, and we're going to talk about a really interesting topic that most people are not really familiar with. And we're going to talk about deuterium and how low or high levels of deuterium affect our health and also can cause disease. This is an entirely new concept, and it could be a major factor in a lot of unexplained diseases. It may be a key factor in cancer and other chronic diseases. So today we have Dr. Q Collins. Dr. Collins is a leading scientist when it comes to developing and applying nutrition and metabolic therapies to treat cancer in both people and pets. Dr. Q has a PhD in clinical immunology, and he's the co-founder and principal investigator of Signature Health Metabolic Diagnostics Clinic. It's the first clinic in the world that uses deuterium and tracer technologies to describe and follow the health status of patients with metabolic disorders such as cancer, diabetes, and autoimmune diseases. Dr. Q, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
So, can you tell us about basically the deuterium theory of health and disease?
Well, yeah, let's go back to it. We know that all food that we eat contains hydrogens in it, and carbons. That's what we are for the most part. So deuterium.
So this is basically taking our analysis of our bodies and our health down to the molecular level.
That's correct. I mean, that's where we've been talking about we've gone through our times from organs to cells. Now we're at the molecular level, and there's nothing smaller than that.
Right.
And deuterium is a type of hydrogen. Hydrogen, which is the most plentiful element in the world and in our body. Our bodies are made up of hydrogens. And the deuterium is a hydrogen that's twice as big and twice as heavy because it has an extra neutron with it. And it is naturally occurring, but it's rare. About approximately 155 out of every million hydrogens in nature is a deuterium. Okay.
And what's the negative impact of having a lot of deuterium in our bodies?
Well, let's talk about how it works.
Okay.
So we know that when we talk about metabolism and what we do with our food, we know we bring our food into our bodies to make energy and to build pieces of our body, whether it's our protein or our eyes or our brain or whatever. Right. Well, deuterium, because it's twice as big, when it's used to make energy, it breaks something in the mitochondria, and therefore the mitochondria can't make energy anymore. Okay. At the same time, when it also uses that deuterium to build something like a protein or DNA, when it puts in there, when it gets in there, it makes that thing that you're trying to building defective, because almost everything works by a lock and key mechanism, which means an enzyme or a protein's got to fit into a certain space.
Right.
And when deuterium's on it, it can't fit in that space anymore. And therefore, it can't be as efficient or as effective as it usually is.
So, in other words, we'll have less energy because our mitochondria are not working as efficiently.
Correct. And that's what happens. Not only do you have less energy, but it forces your body now to no longer use the Krebs cycle, which is going to get kind of geeky, no longer use the Krebs cycle where we make more energy per molecule of food that we make.
Right.
It has to use it outside the body, and it therefore requires a lot more glucose in your body to give you the same amount of energy. So diseases like diabetes, cancer, you start to see a lot more sugar. Your blood sugar starts to go up because your body has got to use it because its mitochondria no longer can make energy.
So I'm confused. So you're saying the body mobilizes sugar from is it producing gluconeogenesis,
Yes,
or it's tricking your body into consuming more sugar?
There's two things that happens. Your body does go through gluconeogenesis, but actually you just eat more. You start to eat more, and you start to crave foods like high carbs, and that's why you get that diabetics and cancer patients, or even the obese start to crave carbs.
So in other words, we're trained as functional medicine practitioners to understand that when you consume a lot of high glycemic carbohydrates, you produce insulin resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially the cells become less sensitive to insulin, and that's why you have to consume more carbohydrates to get the same energy out of your body. And so, and then when the body produces a lot of insulin, it brings those blood sugar levels down, and that's why you get the cravings for carbohydrates. But now you're positing another theory why your body craves carbohydrates and tricks you into consuming more of them, which is the need for
the need to actually to make more energy from less. So I guess that's the best way to put it. And everything you said is definitely true.
And it's totally separate from the whole insulin blood sugar level.
So yeah, if you look at the insulin blood sugar levels, that's downstream, right?
Okay.
That's everything that happens. But upstream, what's really happening is your body is not able to have the right kind of foods to make the energy it needs in your mitochondria.
Okay.
And therefore, it stops using the mitochondria as efficiently. And to make more energy, it's got to go outside the mitochondria to a place that requires higher concentrations of glucose. So that insulin sensitivity and everything is related actually what your body needs. So it's while we treat it right now as a therapeutic problem, it's
right.
really an evolutionary step to get around this. That's the reason. That's the reason. Wintertime, you will find that your insulin sensitivity goes down in wintertime. And that's a reason for that. It's because that's what it's supposed to do evolutionary.
Well, I thought the whole point of that was so you could store fat to survive the winter because there might not be energy coming.
Well, there's two reasons. You're right. So it's not.
Well, I thought
that's what happens. Right. That's what happens. But the reason, because your glucose is going to be so much higher at the time, a lot of it's going to get shuttled. Because, again, you can't use it all. It's going to get shuttled to fat.
Okay. Right. Because I thought the concept was, let's say we go back to the caveman days and, preparing for winter, the caveman, for example, would eat a bunch of berries and fruit, and that fruit was, going to, as a result of the changes in insulin sensitivity, was going to store as fat so we could survive the winter because there wouldn't be any food available for that period of time.
And that is true too. And what we're finding is that, again, the relationship between what we know and what we're finding out about deuterium is really amazing. For instance, in that exact thing that you start talking about, fruit and the things that are available. The deuterium levels change during seasons and change especially within the foods we eat. Fruit, for instance, is a very high in deuterium, and that's the reason it's only available certain times of the year, which match up to what you're saying. So it works out very, very, very well. All the theories that we're coming up with, we're not really recreating anything, we're just helping you define it better.
So fruit is very high in deuterium?
Yes, fruit is very high in deuterium because fruit,
because that's a lot of water?
Not so much water, because fruit is used to store sugars. Right? Unlike the green plants. So it's used to store sugars. And the really reason that I think that we have fruit is to make other fruit trees. And to make trees for the oxygen. So what happens with fruit, it used to be at least, the fruit would be there for 3 months would drop to the ground, an animal would eat it, poop, and another tree would grow.
Right.
But now we're starting to use it a lot more as a source of food every day,
right.
all the time, which, I don't know, maybe it was, which didn't exist 100 years ago, 200 years ago. That's not the way it worked.
Right.
So we didn't get the deuterium challenge that we get now.
Huh. And so what other foods are high in deuterium?
Well, mostly, let's even talk about even from the other side about what's low.
Okay.
The things that are low are the things that we always knew were good. Vegetables, green plants, those are very good for you because green plants have chloroplasts which get rid of deuterium. Okay? So those are why vegetarian diets and things are good for you because we think it's low in deuterium. And by being low in deuterium, our body's able to use them and is able to make the right kind of energy and enough energy for us and able to make things of the proteins and other building components that are structurally correct for us. Okay?
So besides green vegetables, what other foods are low in deuterium?
Well, it's mostly, again, green vegetables, grass-fed animals. Because grass-fed animals eat grass and green vegetables.
Okay.
Now, what foods are not so good for us? And those are processed foods. Because processed foods are synthetic, which we make, and what it does, it uses water, which has high deuterium in it, natural water, and that water is used to combine with carbs, then to give us a processed carbohydrate, right? And those are high in deuterium.
I see. And so what are some of the negative consequences of eating high deuterium foods, besides what we already know, which is, we're all familiar with the fact that if we eat a lot of processed carbohydrates and processed foods in general, they're generally associated with chronic diseases like diabetes and heart disease, etc.
And that's perfect. And again, we're not recreating will, we're just defining how the will works better. So just as you said, all those things are associated with diabetes and cancer and obesity. The reason they're associated is, as we talked about, they have a lot more deuterium in them. That deuterium then goes into the mitochondria, breaks it, so we can't make enough energy, which gives you fatigue, makes you tired, makes you short-tempered, makes you depressed, all these things that we talk about. And then that also leads to structural changes. The deuterium could then go into be part of your DNA, doesn't allow your DNA to fold correctly anymore, and that leads to cancer and allows that transcription of that DNA to keep going.
Huh.
So, and when we see we do MRIs, and we can look at MRIs and pick out cancer cells on an MRI based on the deuterium, and that's another thing that we do in our labs.
Oh, really? How's that?
It's been going very well. We patented technology about a year ago, but we're able to take an MRI that's gated with we use a 1.5 Tesla, and believe it or not, MRIs are based on deuterium. So when you
Is that right?
Yeah. So when you drink that contrast juice,
I thought they were based on protons.
Yeah, that's right. And deuterium, the difference between deuterium and a regular hydrogen, remember, it's just an extra neutron.
Right.
So it's twice as heavy. So what you have when that magnet hits it, you have the lighter one moving faster and then the deuterium following after. When they give you contrast, that contrast is a deuterium liquid that allows it now to have more.
Gadolinium is what we often use.
That's what it is. It's high deuterium and a high deuterium molecule. So that's
I thought it was a metallic.
Yeah, it is metallic. It's a metallic element that has a lot of deuterium in it. That's the whole idea behind it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so now what we're able to do is look at that MRI and be able to judge on where the deuterium is in your body.
So you can do essentially a deuterium scan?
Right. It's just a regular scan, but we have algorithms that we're able to tell where the deuterium is just from the algorithms we have.
Interesting.
So we have for all of our patients, probably 20% of our patients get the MRIs because they use it to tell where metastases are, and our athletes are able to look and see if there's a problem in a particular muscle that they're having weakness in. And then we can go about treating it that way.
So if we had a patient who was an athlete, and could you do a deuterium scan just to see if there's a likelihood they're going to have an issue, or you do it specifically when they have an injury?
No, our athletes right now that we work with do two things. One, we measure the deuterium in their body. We also look at the deuterium in their tissue, and we judge from there. So if they're able, for instance, I can't name a lot. We have one particular person that just won a gold medal, 2 gold medals in the Olympics, and she was on a ketogenic diet plus our deuterium depleted water.
Right.
And what we're able to do is to take her metabolism and increase her metabolism. Now she's a world-class athlete, but doing this we're able to give her like 10 or 15% more energy. So that allows her to actually be able to swim better and longer and recover faster, because lactate and everything else is now lower. And so she was able to recover a lot faster.
Okay. So this athlete came into your lab, and then what was the whole workup that you did?
So we do of course functional medicine and everything, just like we believe that we're part of functional medicine.
Okay.
We just believe that we should be the front line, and that our belief is that the way functional medicine will start to be is that they will add us as one more thing to look at.
Okay.
And we measure, see what kind of energy levels, fix their body's ability to make energy effectively, and then we look at all the other things as we do in functional medicine.
Okay.
So the person comes in, the first thing we do is we measure the deuterium levels in their saliva, their serum, their biological fluids. We measure the deuterium in their tissues.
Right.
And then we put them on a diet and exercise regimen and everything that then lowers that deuterium. And sleep is a very important part of it. That's really big. A lot of our basketball players, the NBA is focusing on that now too, of making sure they get better sleep when they're on the road, because that is key to getting rid of deuterium. Okay.
So you brought us a device to show how you test for deuterium levels in the tissues. Can you show that to us?
Yeah. So in the tissues, the way we check for deuterium levels is using breath.
Okay.
And so this is a simple thing that we've invented, and it's a tube.
Right.
And this tube has we have this tube, and the tube you put on top of it is an aluminum tube that gets frozen.
Okay.
And so we put this on top of this.
Right.
It's just like blowing breath on a cold window.
Okay.
Right? So the person blows in here.
Right.
The breath comes up through the tube and is frozen to the side of the tube.
Okay.
And then we take it off.
Right.
And then we get the water that's inside the tube, and we see what the deuterium level is in that water.
Okay.
And that is directly related to the deuterium that's in your tissue.
Okay.
So we can measure where that is versus the other assays that we do to measure the deuterium that's in your saliva and your biological fluids, and tell you how well you're able to get rid of deuterium now. So, and then say, well, we need to fix your sleep, or maybe you need an IV treatment to try to get deuterium down.
So on a normal basis, the average person who's healthy, their body takes in deuterium and regularly gets rid of it through the mitochondria.
That's correct. It regularly gets rid of it, and that's important. Not only through the mitochondria, but through the lymphatic systems at night. That box of things that we're just discovering now. So that's very, very important. As you age and as you get sick and infirm, your ability to get rid of deuterium and to sleep goes down. And so there's a direct relationship between the aged and the infirm and how much deuterium is in their tissue and in their saliva and every place else.
So if you measure the deuterium level in the tissues, and then you measure the deuterium level, say, in the saliva, and let's say the deuterium levels in the tissues is higher than the level in the saliva, what is that telling you?
That means you're in trouble. So again, it's just like anything. Your deuterium levels in your tissue should always be lower than, because your tissue is constantly trying to get rid of it, constantly getting rid of it. So as you get older, that you'll see less of the ability to get rid of it without help, right?
But in the saliva, isn't that fluid that your body's? Why should it be? So it should be higher in the saliva than it is in the tissues.
Correct.
Why is that?
Because again, that's what your tissue is dumping it to your saliva, into your urine and all these other things. It's dumping it out.
Right.
Okay, so that's the reason.
I see.
And there's active we think there's active mechanisms in tissues that do this. We're still learning what they are.
Okay. Great. So we can screen somebody for deuterium levels, and then also the deuterium, their body's ability, the efficiency with which your body is getting rid of deuterium.
Correct, and we can correlate that to metabolic status, whether that metabolic status be your metabolic rate, or that may be your depression, that may be, it's all these things that correlate to what level your deuterium is and what your health, what your health status is, and that's what we're really, really focusing on right now.
And you're saying this could be beneficial for athletic performance?
Well, we have quite a few athletes that are using it, and it's quite beneficial to add I mean, imagine you don't have to work as hard. You can get bigger, stronger, and faster without working harder. It's that simple. You don't need steroids. You don't need drugs. You let your body do it naturally, because what you're doing is you're letting your body become better at what it does.
So let's say an athlete comes to your clinic and they get tested, and you discover that they're not as efficiently getting rid of deuterium as they could. What's the next? What are some of the therapeutics that you'll utilize?
Well, our first line of therapeutics we use would be looking at their diet and what they're eating, their lifestyle, and using deuterium depleted water. And by using deuterium depleted water, you can imagine that you're really almost diluting deuterium out of your body, right? By diluting deuterium out of your body, and that allows now those motors to work more efficiently and easily, and allows your body now to start repairing itself, allows you to sleep better. So that's the first thing we do. Right with that, we also look at their sleep patterns. We look at both a home sleep test to see if they have any structural problems, and we do an EEG to see how long they're in REM sleep. Because the REMS phase is when you're getting rid of your deuterium, just like when your lymphatics are opening and when you're getting rid of all the toxins in your body. Happens when your body repairs itself during REM phase.
Right.
If you don't have REM, you're not repairing, and you will age, and age quickly. So that's the first part we do it. Then we use a series. We can also use different IVs that we found that can bind deuterium and remove it. And we use a lot of things that we already know about, like hyperbaric oxygen therapy. We now understand how it works, and so we can use that too.
Oh, really?
Yes. So hyperbaric oxygen therapy with a ketogenic diet allows you to have a lot of the things that you need to make now good metabolic water, right? So again, you're pushing yourself to make metabolic water that's low in deuterium.
I see.
So you can drink and you can eat. When you eat, it goes through a different pathway.
Okay.
Right? Than when you drink.
Okay. And so, what are some of the other therapeutics? So this low deuterium water, where is that available?
Well, the low deuterium the low deuterium we get from Hungary, and I'm going to show you a bottle of it.
Okay.
This is Preventa. It is one of our principals scientists that's with us, Gabor Samoji, is the inventor of this.
Okay.
And he's really one of the fathers of how deuterium works. He has, I think he's published over 70 papers.
Okay.
We've published another 60 on the topic of a lot of different nutritions.
And Dr. Laszlo Boros is your partner in the business as well, and he's done a lot of the research.
What Laszlo did was connect. I met Laszlo about a year ago, and he told me how my diet was working. I didn't know a lot. I didn't know what deuterium was. I worked on ketogenic diets and chemotherapeutics and antibodies. That's what I did.
See.
But what he was able to show us how that worked, and to join both Gabor on the water side and myself on the food side with his knowledge, and we put this together.
Interesting.
Put it together. So this is 85 parts per million.
Okay.
This is a therapeutic. We use this in cancer patients, diabetic patients, a lot of fatigue. It comes in in 5 different concentrations of deuterium. So going from 125 parts per million down to 25 parts per million. And the 25 parts per million is like a drug. It is as effective and as efficient as anything that's out there at going at the metabolism and fixing it.
Can you get it in a glass bottle?
Well, that's interesting. We actually are bringing it here. And I always say there's 2 things. We're going to bring it here and thinking about glass bottles. But more than anything else, as a therapeutic, and the person that's made them the whole life, we know that this works as it is in this bottle. That therapeutically, again, we have over, I think, 10, 11 clinical trials. We have a clinical trial that's going to start in chronic lymphocytic leukemia. Okay. So it's really, like I said, it's really serious. It's not, we study and evaluate and put them through clinical trials with peer-reviewed articles to say that this is real, and let anybody come and tell us what they think and what they don't think, right?
Right.
So that's so.
Have you had some skeptics in the medical community?
Well, I think Laszlo is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. So again, you can imagine, just like to tell somebody that nutrition's important, they kind of laugh at you to begin with.
Right.
But as you sit down and we talk about biochemistry and how biochemistry works and the enzymatic pathways and the biological pathways, it's easy. We haven't had one scientist that at the end of the day hasn't go, I get this. This makes sense. Right. Because we're totally agnostic. I don't believe carbs are bad for you. I don't believe proteins are good for you. It's what they're made of. And as we understand that more and more, maybe we can get the manufacturing people that make these things to start manufacturing the right way. I dream someday that everybody can eat a donut, and a donut diet won't matter. And if we can make them out of the right things, you can do that.
Yeah, that's not my dream. I'm dreaming that people finally stop eating donuts.
Well, I guess I have to. Okay, you got me. But it's actually interesting when you say that. It's so, and as you know, when you work with cancer patients, it's always very interesting the comfort foods that they want. Right. And it would be nice. We make a lot of effort to making a lot of different foods that are ketogenically made that taste a lot like the things that they're missing, like chocolate and donuts and candy. Yeah. And it is very interesting because what you really want them to do, like any other drug, is to use it and stay compliant. Right. And so while we may joke about the donuts, and if they would just eat all the donuts, it's medicine. It's not the food. It actually is medicine. So
no, it's really true, and it's really an issue with cancer patients. I have a cancer patient now, and he's going through his treatments, and he's losing a ton of weight, and he's too weak to make food for himself, and he's just pounding down these Ensures that are just loaded with sugar. And I'm trying to get him to make some green smoothies because, he's having treatment to his throat, so he's having a tough time swallowing, which I totally understand. But he's just too weak to go to the store and to cook, and he's just pounding down these Ensures. And
yeah, well, that's one of the things. Again, that's a perfect exact kind of patient that would be helped by the deuterium depleted water and what we do, because by doing that, then he's able to make, without changing anything, his body starts to make more energy. He stops feeling fatigued. He no longer is going to crave a lot, and he can start eating. And it's just amazing. And as I showed you before, we just did a study to where we're going to do a bigger 40-patient study coming up. But we just gave 4 subjects, deuterium depleted water and measured their metabolism. And we saw this within a week, just with the water and nothing else, that their resting metabolic rate went up by 40%.
Now, can you explain the mechanism by which deuterium or high or low deuterium plays a role in cancer?
Yes. So it plays a role in 2 different ways. One is we know one of the hallmarks of cancer is lack of energy and fatigue. So one of the things that what it does is deuterium, as we talked about, by decreasing your ability to make energy, has an effect not only on every cell in your body, including your immune system. Okay. That's the first part. The second part is the deuterium molecule itself. Right. The deuterium is twice as big as a hydrogen. So when that becomes part of a protein or part of your DNA lattice, right, that one deuterium takes in the next 10 hydrogens after it. So it's called tunneling. And so it makes a big ball on those histones and things we always talk about. So it makes this big ball. And so now the DNA can't fold over it. So it stays open. And when it stays open, it starts to be transcribed all the time. So it's always made. which is a classic thing you see with all cancer cells. They're aneuploidy, which means they have more than one copy of DNA. And so every cancer cell that you see has deuterium in it. As a matter of fact, that is one, and deuterium is very common in anything that grows fast. GMOs, for example. When we look at GMO food, the way GMO foods work is that they have extra copies of things that put deuterium in the food. And so that's the reason they work so fast, which is probably the reason they're all so loaded with deuterium. So that's the reason they're bad for it. Not so much the genetic part of it, but that they're loaded with deuterium now.
Right.
And that's what makes it grow. So just like a cancer cell.
Well, there's probably a lot of reasons why, GMO foods are bad.
Oh, yeah, again.
And then, of course, manipulating the genes of a plant, we really have no idea what the effects might be, and it could take, decades to find that out. And then plus a lot of the genetically modified foods are genetically modified to be resistant to herbicides like Roundup. So then we know if we're eating genetically modified wheat or corn, we're ingesting Roundup.
No, you're exactly right. Again, those are all things that are happening upstream, and I agree with you. But when we're talking about I'm just talking about how food is used. Right. Just how it's used on a molecular basis. Okay. Now, all those other things are even add to the badness of what's been made. Right. I totally agree with you.
Right. So it's interesting. There's been one of the hottest topics in cancer research recently has been a ketogenic diet, especially on the nutrition front, and how that can play a positive role in helping with cancer and sometimes intermittent fasting and some of the cancer clinics are having patients fast on the day or two before and the day of treatment and maybe the day afterwards when they come in for their chemo. Mm-hmm. And what you're telling us is that fasting, the theory that currently is in existence is the reason why fasting is beneficial is because you're lowering the glucose, and cancer cells are predominantly glycogenic. They need sugar to for energy. They can't use other forms of energy like the other cells can. And so restricting that glucose supply makes it harder for the cancer cells to grow. Now, you're telling us that there's another reason why ketogenic diets are beneficial because of its effect on deuterium.
Right. And again, it's a serendipity on my part. I was, again, the ketogenic diets and making meals and a lot of the things you're talking about are based on research that came out of my old labs. Okay. So intermittent fasting and how all these things work is definitely true because what it's trying to do is lower the sugar level, but also start to burn fat. Right. And by burning that fat, as I said before, fat is usually depleted in deuterium, and therefore when your body uses that fat molecule itself, it's even being able to make better metabolic water. The problem that we're running into that I'm finding now, which is scary, is that unfortunately a lot of, because we've, just like a cow that's eating grain, right. Because we've eaten a lot of our obese patients, overweight patients, have eaten a lot of grain-fed animals, and right. Our fat even has deuterium in it. So as it's broken off, that deuterium can come in and break your motors and cause all those fatigue and things that you see in cancer patients. So what we're doing is finding ways now, even with a cancer patient, as it releases that, we want them to burn that fat, right. We're finding ways to get rid of the deuterium as they do it. Interesting. So it's a win-win.
What are some of the best ways to do that?
Well, it's very interesting. Using a non-synthetic vitamin C. Vitamin C actually is able to bind deuterium. Okay. It's one of the things. So it's vitamin C and some other things that we're testing to bind.
So when you say non-synthetic vitamin C.
Yeah, so it's always, remember, here's what gets to be so interesting. Because what you've got to do is you want to form a member of a vitamin C that does not have deuterium in it. So if you synthetically made ascorbic acid, if you synthetically made it, you made it again with tap water, with distilled water, which has higher levels of deuterium in it. If you got that instead from a plant extracted, then you can take that vitamin C, and that vitamin C has less deuterium in it, right?
Okay.
But it also has to be extracted. So we're learning all these fascinating things, and we're working with different supplement companies to try to make their products better and more effective.
Interesting. I think, aren't the majority of vitamin C products on the market derived from corn? Aren't they derived from a food?
Well, again, so as you go further, remember we talked, so the answer that definitely could be how they process it and where it came from. So it's not necessarily that all vegetables are good.
Right.
Corn just happens to be one, again, that's not deuterium depleted.
Okay.
You know, so it is interesting. Again, it's not a deuterium depleted.
So how many of the vitamin C products on the market would fit your...
I don't even know.
Yeah.
The way we go about things is we start with the theory and then work with somebody to see what's working with theirs.
I see.
And then test it.
Interesting.
And go. So that's really our niche, or what we bring to society, is that we're able to diagnose these things and put it within a medical context.
And of course, that could be why high dose IV vitamin C is used in cancer therapy by functional medicine practitioners.
Well, again, I've been using it for the past 8-9 years with cancer patients, high IV vitamin C, both in my dogs and people. And it's fantastic. It's really but now we understand how to make it better, right? Much better. And the reason that high concentrated vitamin C worked better is because you needed such a high dose for its capacity to remove deuterium, because some of it was bound up already naturally from the water that you put it in and from everything else. So we're looking at making deuterium depleted solutions so you can make IVs. We're doing all these kind of things to try to make what we do work better.
Very interesting. Okay, Dr. Q, this was a very interesting discussion we've had, and I think this is bringing a lot of new information to our listeners. So for patients and practitioners who'd like to get a hold of you, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, we're located, you can go to our website at www.signaturehealth.com, and Signature is Cignature.
Okay.
We're located in Santa Monica, California.
Okay.
On Wilshire Boulevard, and you can stop by the clinic, or you can just give us a call. We have an 800 number. I think it's 800-208-0280. But we'd be glad to meet with you, to show you around the lab. We teach classes to doctors from UCLA on Thursday nights. And so anybody's available, want to come over and learn about this thing. This is a class and something that UCLA is taking very seriously. Again, we're part of the umbrella of transitional medicine. So this is from a top-notch institution that we're able to go through this. And we just published 2 more papers on the subject within the last 2 months. So anything we can do to help.
Okay. Can you send me a copy of those papers?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. So are you, if functional medicine practitioners had, let's say me or, another functional medicine practitioner who's listening to this podcast, had a cancer patient or an athlete, are you open to having us send them over to maybe get tested for deuterium and then send them back to us for treatment?
That's actually what we do. So I want everybody to understand, we don't want to treat.
Okay.
That's not what we do.
We
work with clinicians, and we think the best form, our number one line is functional medicine people, because we believe you're in the right direction. You're understanding what to do and how important diagnostics and labs are.
Right.
That's a big step over most clinicians. They don't get it. So we work with you, and consider it's just another way to empower you with better clinical judgment. That's all we do.
And then how about the availability of the water?
Well, the water we'll have our first shipment in the United States for inventory within the next 4 weeks. It will be available, and it's only going to be offered through professionals. So functional medicine people will be able to use it. People are not going to, we consider this a therapeutic modality. So it's not going to be something that's on Amazon. It's not a joke. This is real stuff.
Okay.
We want to get rid of medicine, but a natural way to do it.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Q.
Well, thank you so much.
This has been a very interesting discussion.
Really appreciate it.
Okay.